Well, hello. My name's Whit Sasser, gospel preacher, also one of the shepherds of the congregation called the Appleton Church of Christ in Appleton, Wisconsin. With the internet, it's hard to know where you are located, and that's okay. Glad to have a worldwide possibility for the benefit of this study. And the study we're calling, or I've been calling, Walking Through Second Corinthians, and as the title hopefully suggests, it's a walk through the book of Second Corinthians, one of the books of the New Testament written by the Apostle Paul. And we're presently beginning chapter 11. This is also episode number 11. And as I've said before, more than once, I'm not trying to do one chapter per episode, but it's just ending up that way, at least for now. I don't know. There's only a couple chapters left, 12 and 13, I believe, after this one. So we'll see. The intention, at least, has not been to do it that way, but that's just the way it goes. If you want to follow along, reading in your own Bible, you're welcome. Chapter 11, 2 Corinthians. If you prefer to just listen, I'll be reading a little portion at a time and commenting briefly as I walk through, not trying to expositorily break down every verse. I'm trying to just give a few comments as I go along and walk through the book. So anyway, all right. So with that said, let's get underway again. And if I need a review to set it up, I'll do that after the first reading. It's in chapter 11, verse 1. Oh, that you would bear with me in a little folly, and indeed you do bear with me, for I'm jealous for you with godly jealousy. For I betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. But I fear lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he who comes preaches another Jesus whom we've not preached, or if you receive a different spirit which you've not received, or a different gospel which you've not accepted, you may well put up with it. For I consider that I'm not at all inferior to the most eminent apostles, even though I am untrained in speech, yet I'm not in knowledge, but we have been thoroughly manifested among you in all things. Did I commit sin in humbling myself? Let me stop there. I'm glancing down as I stop to see that he carries on for a few more verses, and I don't want too big a chunk of reading to comment on. And so let me just stop, and I'll try to back up a little bit where I left off there when we resume the reading here in a minute. All right, let me just set it up this way. Paul the Apostle, more than once in the book of Second Corinthians, has had to try to defend his position as an apostle, that is, God-given position, not that he assumed the office or took it upon himself, but God desired for Paul the Apostle to be an apostle primarily to non-Jews, not solely, but greatly to the Gentiles. And Paul had been instrumental in starting the congregation in Corinth. You can read about that in the book of Acts. And so he was like a father to them. In this case, he almost talks it like I betrothed you to one husband. It's almost like a father to a daughter kind of thing. And so anyway, he has had to resort to what he thinks is foolishness. Folly is the New King James word. Let me bear with me in a little folly. He hates to have to do this. He doesn't like it, we'd say. But sometimes we do what we hate or don't like because it's being forced upon us, not conscientiously sinning. Paul wouldn't resort to sinning to get a job done, but he would stoop, if you will, to less than what would be ideally preferred if it was going to be advantageous. And because of the Corinthians, at least some of them, in their attitudes towards him, he's had to resort to defending his honor, his prestige, his eminence, his greatness, his apostleship, that kind of thing. And it's, as I said, to him, foolishness. But he knows that they seem to put up with various others that come along, whether from within or from without, various ones coming along with a different spirit, a different gospel, and they are corrupted by some of what these are saying. Now, in the book of Galatians, he talks about, I marvel. This is chapter 1 of Galatians. I marvel you are so soon removed from the gospel we delivered. Well, here in Corinthians, he doesn't say, I marvel you're so soon, but he does talk about it some more. He indicates, I'll just read it, a different gospel which you've not accepted, you may well put up with it. That's in verse 4. And so he's just real concerned that he can't even, not that he's wanting to, leave them and have nothing more to do with them, but he can't leave them and have nothing more to do with them, and it's already a real concern of his. And he's pleading with them. Now, he is planning to come to them in person, and he's hopeful some things can get addressed and corrected before he gets there, so his visit will not primarily be unpleasant because he's having to correct them about everything. And so that's part, at least, of the purpose of 2 Corinthians, to try to get that done. Okay. Oh, one more thing here. I'm just glancing to remind myself. One more thing, and then we'll resume the reading. They thought of him, at least some did. I don't know that it was every single Corinthian member of the congregation, but there were enough there that he addresses the less stature many thought of him. It's true he didn't have the best speech. We talked about that last time. I'd encourage you to listen to the previous, it'd be episode number 10, I believe, if you wish to hear what I said about that. But something about his speech, he knew that was nothing to brag about or nothing to be, special. But hopefully, other than that, of course, he was very much in knowledge, no less than any other apostle. But sometimes by what Paul says, you gather what either their questions were or what their comments or statements were. And some of them in Corinth were putting him in a second-class position. I'm using my own words. A second-class position of apostleship, and he's having to defend his apostleship, and I know he hates doing that. As he said before, it's folly or foolishness, but seems like unless he defends himself, there won't be any hope of them giving the proper respect to him that is owed and due him, and so forth. And the next thing I can already glance and see, he's going to talk about his choice not to be supported financially by them. Let's just read about it. This I'll back up a little bit. Did I commit sin? This is verse, let's go back to 5. For I consider that I am not at all inferior to the most eminent apostles, even though I am untrained in speech, yet I'm not in knowledge, but we have been thoroughly manifested among you in all things. Did I commit sin in humbling myself that you might be exalted, because I preached the gospel of God to you free of charge? I robbed other churches, taking wages from them to minister to you. And when I was present with you and in need, I was a burden to no one, for what I lacked, the brethren who came from Macedonia supplied. And in everything I kept myself from being burdensome to you. Let me read that again. And in everything I kept myself from being burdensome to you, and so I will keep myself. As the truth of Christ is in me, no one shall stop me from this boasting in the regions of Achaia. Why? Because I do not love you? God knows. But what I do, I will continue to do, that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are in the things of which they boast. For such are false apostles. Let me stop there before I read that. And he continues to talk, and I even began to say what he says next. But let me pause here and comment on this business of choosing not to be supported by them. He knew, and of course they know, at least they need to know, that he has a right to be supported, God-given right to be supported. He's addressed that to them elsewhere, not here. Did I do wrong? If so, it was definitely not intended to do wrong by not taking support from you. And of course, most people would instantly say, hey, everybody likes freeness, if that's a word. But no, somehow maybe they were twisting it to be more of worth or stock if he was supported. If he didn't get support, what were they saying? Were they saying he wasn't worth it, or what? And he makes it clear, I had needs and I took care of my needs with support from elsewhere. He even uses a strong word like robbed. I don't think he means I took it against their will from Macedonian churches. I robbed them and they didn't even know I took money. What he just means is it could have been from you, maybe he even should have been from you, Corinthians, but I took it from elsewhere. And of course, that shows that the Bible is quite okay and God is okay with churches supporting preaching elsewhere. It doesn't just have to be locally where they're located. In this case, up northern Greece, Macedonia, they're supporting Paul in his work in southern Greece, and so forth. And he basically says, well, he doesn't say I'd do it again, but he doesn't plan to change anything. And he's not in it for their possessions or money. He's in it for them. And it was a choice he made. It wasn't God said, preach free, but it was a choice that he could either be supported in doing his work or not. But it was his decision. And I think he didn't want it to be seen that he was in it for the finances, the benefit financially that he could get from them. And that'll be a call the preacher has to make, along those lines. Okay. And also one more thing, and then I'll continue the reading. In verse 12, he indicates, I'm just trying to cut off any occasion that some of those who are our opponents have along these lines regarding the things of which we boast in verse 12. So sometimes there's even either a decision made, or in this case, a sticking with a decision to take away certain opportunity, if you will, for opposition. Take a weapon out of their arsenal, I guess is one way of putting it. Okay. Now, speaking of those folks that I just mentioned, those that are not at all his supporters faithfully, they're his opponents actually, listen to how he describes them. Verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it's no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. I'll stop. That's 15. Okay. Let me just comment here, and this is one of those times we won't finish a chapter in an episode. I think I'm going to stop after this. Couple things come to mind, and like I said, I don't have prepared notes to share with this. Is just off the top of my head. One of the things that strikes me, he says it twice, really. I'll just read it again. Such are false apostles, and then dropping down in the same verse, dropping down, transforming themselves into apostles. There were those there somehow putting themselves on a par, on a level with Paul, Peter, James, John, others that would be apostles. It would appear. For why else would he say that? He doesn't seem to be presenting what they appear to be like, but what they are seeking to do. And they're false. They're liars. They're not truly apostles, as I am, Paul, or he could say the same for Peter and others. They're deceitful about it. He mentions there in the middle of the verse. And so I know it's hard to accept. I'm right there with you if that's what you're saying. Boy, that's hard to believe and accept that people within the church are deceitful workers and scam and shamefully disguising what they're up to and so forth. Yeah, well, I know. I'm not saying it's nothing, but I'm just saying it's nothing new if you say, well, it's going on today. Well, it's been going on for 2,000 years. Even Judas, you know about him and his betrayal of Jesus. And so this kind of thing happens. Paul, though, makes it clear where their roots are is with the devil. He does that kind of thing. Satan is a disguise artist. Satan and his influences in the world are not genuinely open and aware. Obvious. And so he says, why would you think anybody else who's doing things that the devil would like them to do would resort to the same kind of thing? And so, Satan disguises himself. Those who are not walking according to God's will and the truth will often disguise as well. They're not going to be broadcasting openly and overtly and knowledgeably what's up with what they're saying or how they're behaving and working. Okay, I said I'd stop after this. One last comment, and then I will stop for this episode, and that is that it's a deceitfulness, if you will, of those workers that will have a bad end. The last thing I read, he says, "Whose end will be according to their works," and that's being worded in a negative way. God will judge them. Obviously, he's trying to expose them. Paul is, but they don't have to necessarily be. In fact, they're not the final say on it. God will, or the Lord will, judge them in the last day. In the end, he calls it in verse number 15. They'll get what's rightly coming to them because of that. Okay. So next time, God willing, chapter 11, verse 16 is where we will resume, and I'll have to remember that because it's been, like I said, oftentimes one chapter per episode, and it's not the case this time. Join me then, if you will. Hopefully in a few days we'll have episode number 12.